Hello, welcome back to RetroBreak. Recently I've been playing a lot of Trials of Mana on the Switch. I think it's a fantastic remake of the game that came out way back in 1995 on the Super Famicom. Of course, until last year, Seiken Densetsu 3 here never had an official way to play the game in English. It actually first came out in English on the Secret of Mana collection last year, and then this year it got a full 3D remake. And I absolutely loved the game. I played it all the way through, and I even went back after I'd finished the game and did the extra dungeon, and that's something that I don't normally do, so that just goes to show how much I enjoyed this game. But while I was playing it, it got me thinking, what other games have never been re-released or remade that I would really like to see get a Trials of Mana style remake? So the first game on my list here is a Japan exclusive Game Boy game actually made by Nintendo called The Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls. And it's really strange that this has never seen a release outside of Japan. First of all because it's a fantastic game. There is a fan translation out there, so it is completely playable in English, and there's even a group of people making a colour version of the game. This one was released in 1992 and only ever came out in black and white. So there's some really cool stuff going on with this game, but nothing official outside of a few cameos in games like the Wario Land series and Super Smash Bros. So I think it's about time that Nintendo recognised what a fantastic game they've got hidden in the depths of their library and give this one a proper remake. It really deserves it. The game itself plays very similarly to something like Link's Awakening, and of course that got a remake on the Switch just a few years ago, and that turned out amazingly well. So just imagine the same kind of thing, but for the Frog for Whom the Bell Tolls. It's a great game. The only thing that might have a bit of difficulty being ported over to a more modern setting is the battle system. This one basically is a very straightforward battle system where you basically move into an enemy and then all this cartoony like explosions and stuff happen, and you can see the enemy's health and your health slowly going down. So maybe they could rework that into some sort of action RPG style battle system instead. The game has a great story, so it would be great if they just kept that exactly as it was, but just improved the graphics and maybe redid the music with a nice orchestral soundtrack. Overall, I would love to see this remade, but thankfully at least some fans have given gamers a way of enjoying this game in English. Let's just hope Nintendo does the same thing in the future. The second game on my list here, and you're probably going to be completely fed up of me talking about this game by the end of the year, because it is my favourite game of all time, Illusion of Time, or Gaia Gensoki is the Japanese name for it. As I've said many times in the past, this game means so much to me, and unfortunately it's never been re-released or remastered or anything, and I think it's the perfect game to do just that. Like I showed in my Super Famicom pickups video from Japan, the game is based around real-world locations, and I think it would just be amazing to see the locations in this game remastered in HD, in 3D, and if they opened the areas up a bit more and just let you explore. Just the thought of being able to walk around the places that you visit in this game in 3D is just making me so excited. And believe it or not, someone is actually up to the challenge of remaking this, if Square Enix or whoever even owns this game anymore isn't. So I found out that last year actually someone uploaded a first demo of an Illusion of Gaia remake on itch.io, and I'll put a link in the description so you can go and check that out. But basically it's a top-down perspective 3D game that's been remade. They did the first bit in Edward Castle and it just looks and plays really good, considering the fact that it's only made by one person. So fingers crossed they keep working on it, and even if we don't get an official remake, we might eventually be able to play the full game that way. I really hope that's the case. But I also really hope that whoever owns the IP of this game decides to give it another look, because like you'll see later on in this video, the games that Quintet made are absolutely outstanding action RPGs, and it's such a shame that they've never been re-released on anything since. So that's why I put Illusion of Time on this list. There's some really cool stuff that I'm actually working on about this game and about the developer Quintet, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss that in the future. The third game on my list here is a Mega Drive game called Soleil, also known in America as Crusader of Centy. This was basically Sega's answer to a Zelda style game for their system, but it's not entirely like Zelda. It's a lot more action focused, and I love the fact that you get to recruit different animals throughout the game as well. I first played this about 10 years ago when I picked it up from one of my favourite shops called Lee's Games. As you can see there, it's still got its original sticker on it for £9. Unfortunately though, these days I had a look online and the price for this game has just skyrocketed. But even more insane than that is in America it's going almost up to $1,000, which is just absolutely insane. It's never been re-released or remastered or anything, so unless you want to either pay ridiculous eBay prices or play a ROM and find an emulator to play it on, there really is no official way of playing this game anymore, and it is a fantastic game. The gameplay is really fun, the graphics are really bright and colourful, and I think they would do really well to have a nice 3D remake of all the different environments. And the other thing about this game that is really, really good and I would love to see remade is the soundtrack. It has one of my favourite soundtracks out of any game on the Mega Drive. It really is that good. And it's such a shame that it's so hard to play these days, because when I played it back in the day, I really, really enjoyed it. So that's why this game's on my list. Let me know if you've played it down in the comments below. And before I move on to the next game, I just want to say that the Gaming Historian very recently actually did a really good video on this. I'll put a link in the description so you can go and watch it. It gives you a really good idea of what to expect from this game. Now for this next game, we're going all the way back to 1988 and a compiled classic. This is Golvellius: Valley of Doom for the Sega Master System. Out of all the games on my list, this is probably the one that needs a modernisation the most. It's a fantastic game and it's full of original and exciting ideas, but it doesn't really hold up that well today. It's extremely difficult. There's hardly any story to speak of outside of the initial cutscene at the start, and it kind of doesn't give you any idea of where to go or what to do. But the gameplay itself is really fun, and I think if they modernised it a bit, if they gave the game a map and a few more NPCs to interact with, or at least a bit more dialogue when you do find one, this could be a really, really good game. As far as I know, it's never been re-released or remade on anything, and I presume Sega has the license for it now, so they've been doing a lot of remakes recently with their Sega Forever lineup, so it's not out of the realms of possibility to get a new game in this series, or to get a remake, but I would love to see a new Golvellius game or a remake of the original at some point. It really is so unique, even just the fact that the dungeons play completely differently to the overworld. It's just something that I really enjoy, but it is kind of hard going back this far and playing a game like this these days. But even with all that said, it's still one of my favourite games on the entire system, and even if there is no remake, I definitely recommend going and playing the original, just because of how unique it is. If you go in expecting it just to be like Zelda on the Master System, you're going to be really impressed by what they have to offer here. It is a really good game. So Golvellius is a really interesting and unique game, and although I'm not going to talk in too much detail about it today, the Happy Console Gamer a few years ago did a fantastic review, so I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to find out a bit more about it. And before we move on to the next game, I opened it up just to get a bit of B-roll for this video, and I actually noticed that inside it comes with... And I was amazed at the condition of this, because I've had this game for years and I don't think I've looked in there for years either. But it came with a really immaculate condition poster. Just look how cool that is. I think that when I move into whatever house I'm moving into next, I'm actually going to get this framed, because that just looks really, really cool. It just screams 80s Sega, doesn't it? Just look at that. So cool. Following on from Illusion of Time, this is another game by Quintet. Of course, I'm talking about Terranigma for the SNES. Probably the most famous game on this list, and definitely one that really deserves a remake. Of course, the game never even came out in America officially, so the only way you can play it in English is to get a PAL version, like this one that I've got here. This is the Australian version, or it was also released in the UK as well. The game is incredibly expensive though, so unless you're like me, a little bit crazy, and you're willing to spend a few £100 on playing a SNES game these days, or if you want to just emulate it, I mean, I'm not really against emulation, but I just prefer to always have the physical versions of the games. I did actually do a video about that. It's kind of beside the point, but I'll put a link to it in the description in case you're interested in my take on emulators versus original hardware. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. This game is just screaming for a remake. It kind of got released around the same time as Seiken Densetsu 3 back in 1995 or 6, and it plays very similarly as well. In a lot of ways it's a very similar game, and I can just imagine this one playing almost exactly like the Trials of Mana style remake. It has the same sort of battle system, it has all the different environments that you'd expect from an RPG, but the difference between this one and Seiken Densetsu 3 is the fact that this actually has a full overworld, and if this was redone in 3D and it gave you a huge open landscape to explore, and of course the underworld as well, which looked really cool on the SNES. If they could redo that in 3D and make it look just as cool as exciting as it did back then, it would just blow my mind, and I think a lot of other people's too. Like Illusion of Time as well, I'm going to be talking about this game in a lot more detail in the coming months on the channel, so subscribe for that, but this is definitely a game that I would love to see be remade, and I'm sure a lot of you watching would as well. And so, just before I finish this video up, I asked on Twitter what games would you like to see be remade in a Trials of Mana style format, and I got some really good replies. So Chrono Moogle here says Terranigma, of course I've just covered that one, and I know he's a huge fan of Terranigma as well, and he's going to be helping me hopefully with my quintet video, which I'm still planning to put out at some point this year, so fingers crossed I actually make that happen. He's also put here, and I always struggle on pronouncing this game, Rodora no Hiho. I have no idea if I've pronounced that right. Of course that was Square Enix's final game on the Super Famicom, and as far as I know it's never got a translation or a re-release anywhere, so that would be really cool to see. And the final game he suggested, of course, is the absolute classic Chrono Trigger, but to be honest I think Square's too scared to touch that franchise. So apart from the really awkward iOS and Android port, and the recent port of that version onto Steam, I don't really think we're going to be seeing a proper full remake anytime soon, so you're probably better off just playing the DS version for now. And Peebs added onto that list as well, Live Alive on the SNES. I haven't actually played that game, but I've heard that it's really good, and I should probably change that. I should probably play it at some point. So there we go guys, I really hope you enjoyed another episode of Retro Break. That was my list of 5 games that I would like to see be remade like Trials of Mana. Let me know in the comments below what games you'd like to see get a remake, either ones that have never been remade or ones that have never come out in English at all, that you would really like more people to be able to have the chance to play. That's it for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, check out my Patreon and Ko-fi, there's links in the descriptions to those, and I'll see you next week for the next episode. And next week will actually be my 500th episode on the channel, which is just insane. I don't know how I've managed to keep doing this for so long, but there you go. Anyway, I'll see you next week for the next episode. Goodbye!